Greetings and welcome to another episode of 10 Feet Away from Ben Gray. I'm your host, Ben Gray. Returning again for us is Amanda Dudgeon. Amanda, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So we're going to be talking about Joseph and his pretty fantastic jacket. Is that how it goes?
The amazing technicolor dreamcoat.
That's what we're talking about, yes. Which is based on a Bible story. It is a play, but it's based on a Bible story. And it's in Genesis, and it kind of bounces around. There's a lot of Genesis that has to do with Joseph. Yes. So we're not going to be, there's not a specific passage for us to look at, but we'll make sure we include the actual texts in the packet. First question for you before we get into Genesis, before we get into Joseph. What is your most favorite and least favorite thing about the Christmas season?
My most favorite, I'll keep it in a church context. My most favorite is the 10 o'clock Christmas Eve service when they dim the lights and they pass out the candles and we all sing Silent Night together. That is a memory that I love and hold near and dear to my heart. My least favorite thing is I go to about 15,000 worship services in 3 days.
Yes.
And as much as I love the Christmas story and I love the carols, by the third time you're kind of over it.
This is true. Yes, that's accurate.
Yeah.
All right, so jumping into Genesis, and it's 37, Genesis 37, Genesis 38, Genesis 39 mostly that we're talking about. But Joseph, just as background, Joseph was one of 12 brothers. He was, I think, the 11th out of 12, so almost the baby. The baby was Benjamin, just like me.
Yep.
And the babies are always the most favored, except in this case, Joseph's dad had a very clear favorite out of 12, and it happened to be his 11th child, Joseph. Joseph, didn't choose to be the favorite. He didn't do anything wrong that caused him to be the favorite necessarily, or at least it's not said that that's the case. It simply says that Joseph was his father's favorite. This gets Joseph into a lot of trouble, though, specifically with his brothers, but also later on in life. And for the most part, when I'm reading Genesis 37, what I'm reading is Joseph is a victim of the things his brothers do to him. I'll just leave it there. Was Joseph a victim?
I don't think so.
Why not?
I think that he knew he had this special place in his father's heart and in his father's eye, and as a result, he knew that he had some leverage to get away with some things. I think he was a little bit of a brat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's my reading of it as well.
Okay.
Not to say that he deserved to be almost killed and then sold into slavery. In other words, what should have Joseph done instead of what he did?
My initial gut reaction was to shine the light on your other siblings and highlight their accomplishments, but sometimes that can also be seen as belittling.
Yes.
To be like, oh, isn't that cute? You got a little soccer trophy.
Because you're not their parent, and they don't want you to be their parent. They want their parents to be their parent.
Right. So that was my initial reaction, but then the more that I thought about it, I was like, ooh, that could also, if you are the favored child, that could be seen or misinterpreted by the other siblings as you just being really annoying.
Was there something that Joseph could have done, especially regarding the dreams? Should he just not have said anything?
Kind of what you were saying. You need the parent then to kind of be the person to check you, right? To give you those boundaries, to discipline you, to be like, you're being a brat or you're acting like a jerk.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure your parents have said that to you or your other, no, of course
not me, but maybe my brothers.
Angelic. But you have parents and mentors and teachers who guide you on your path. And when you're starting to be a little pompous or a little whatever, they are there to put you in check. But if you're doing that yourself as a 14-year-old kid, or I don't know.
Even as a 30-year-old, it's not easy to...
Yeah, that's true. I mean...
It's not easy to see your own ego.
You need people to point it out a little bit.
You do. Throughout this entire narrative, almost all of Joseph's life, he is, in many ways, a stand-in for God's chosen people writ large. All the trouble that Joseph gets into as a result of being the favored child. And because he's blessed, so much bad stuff happens to him, I think is a great analogy for what happens to God's chosen people, Israel as well, writ large. And that brings us to our next question is about God's blessings. So it says in the text that his prosperity is due to God's blessing being with Joseph. So my question for you is prosperity a sign of God's blessing?
I want to say no, because I think that there are incredibly faithful people who don't find themselves in prosperous situations. Bad things happen to good people. Good things happen to bad people. I don't think that God is, sitting on his throne in heaven being like, oh, Ben did X, Y, and Z today. Like, let's give him a little treat. Like, I don't think it's that kind of exchange of like, you do something good, so then I'm going to reward that. I think God redeems bad things, not always in the timeline that we desire or would like, but I think in the long run, God redeems bad things. So when Joseph's thrown into the pit, he is saved.
Right.
When he's in Potiphar's house, he finds he gets into some trouble, is thrown in prison, but then he's later released from prison and becomes the Prince of Egypt. And so I think God redeems things, but I don't think it's like I was saying before, like an exchange, like, oh, you do something good, then I'm going to reward you. And you do something bad, I'm going to knock you down. I don't think that's how God operates. It's
not as simple as that.
Yeah.
I wonder if it's possible to see. I wonder if it's possible to see God's blessing before the fact, or if that's something that is only revealed in hindsight.
In my experience, it's always after.
Yeah.
It's always after in hindsight and looking back in reflection, being like, oh, okay. But it is in hindsight. Like, you think that God has abandoned you or you're doing this all by yourself. And then it's only later in retrospect, in reflection, where you're like, oh, I see where you were at work.
Right. When I read about Joseph's dreams, it makes me wonder, do dreams have that significance? Is that a way that God talks to us?
I don't know. Because if you remember any of your dreams... Like, I had a reoccurring dream as a child that Cruella de Vil was chasing me. Both the cartoon and Glenn Close version.
Close, yes.
So,
Glenn
do I
Close
believe
just
that
killed
God
that
was talking to me or revealing something really amazing through those dreams? No, I think I was just a very terrified child and thought Cruella de Vil was...
super scary.
Super scary.
Yes.
I don't know. You don't really hear about people being like, oh, I had this vision, this dream, and it manifested.
When you hear about those people, you go to, oh, you're a crazy person.
Yeah, what are you smoking? Like...
Exactly, yes. And thank you for saying this, because that's exactly where I was going, postmodern culture is so quick to dismiss anything that doesn't have an immediate, obvious scientific explanation. And yet, if one of the most important things that extraordinary advances in science have taught us is that the world that we live in is so much more complex and confusing than we ever thought it was. We don't live in a world that we completely understand.
No.
We like to think we do, but in reality, science has revealed just how little we know about the universe that we live in.
With modern science, we're finding answers to things, whereas faith used to be that, the mystery of it. People leaned into it and they found like their meaning and purpose from not knowing. And then all of a sudden, we started uncovering and discovering all these answers, and we've shifted then from faith to science, even though we still don't even know, like you're saying, all the answers. And we are probably even more confused than we were 100 years ago, but how much we want to know those answers and those discoveries. And so we lean into that over the mystery of faith. And
I mean, you said this great. What faith was searching for forever and continues to search for is meaning. Scripture is never meant to answer the question of how. it's always meant to answer the question of why. Why does this all exist? It does not explain how everything came into being in the sense of how science can explain how life reproduces, how planets are formed, how the universe came into being to an extent. One of the tragedies of the postmodern era, though, is that we've stopped asking for meaning. We felt like we have an answer. Science has given us an answer of how, so we're done. No, science has not given us the answer to the question of meaning. Why are we here can never be answered by science, because science is not designed to do that. Well, that's been another episode of 10 Feet Away from Ben Gray. Thank you so much to Amanda for joining us again. Make sure you check out the packet that came with the video that includes both the scripture as well as the questions for you guys to answer at home. Check back next week for a special Christmas episode of 10 Feet Away from Ben Gray, and we look forward to seeing you then.
Can I just say that as we continue to talk about Joseph, whenever you bring something up, immediately my mind goes to like whatever number on the soundtrack we're on.
Like
when you talked about Reuben earlier, I was like, oh, I know that song.
Was that like track 3?
Yeah, pretty much.